If the theater ever reopened and everything stayed the same with the people that we worked with, would you ever go back?
Actually, we were just talking about that with a buddy of mine the other day. Probably yes. And the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure 90% of the people would say the exact same thing, only because it was kind of like dealing with crazy friends every day, which is always kind of interesting, to say the least.
In no more than 2 words, how would you describe the Maxi Saver 12?
Family oriented, I think, because it really, really, really was. If somebody got sick, someone covered. If someone got hurt, they were more than willing to take you to the hospital if you really needed to. If you had something important, family emergencies, they weren't an issue. It was family first, and then it was work. I think it definitely had that, considering that's kind of what it turned into. I think more or less depending on who was running the place. Because someone once said to me, it really, really depends upon who is actually running the place, because they bring their kind of energy to it. So the former manager, but we always kind of thought of her as like the manager. She definitely made the place family oriented. We had a former manager who didn't last quite as long.
I believe 7 months or something like that is what I heard.
I believe it was 7 months.
Okay.
I believe it was, yes. But it wasn't. It was still family oriented because everyone was still there, but it was definitely a different hue, to say the least.
Okay. Would you have any last words about it? Any main thing about it?
I honestly think it was an excellent idea. The fact that they were able to balance the simple dollar. Hey, everyone says, how could you? It had to be closed because of a dollar. It didn't. It was doing the business.
These were the customers that were saying.
Yeah, these were the customers saying. But that it was, it was the low price that drowned it out, but it wasn't. It was what was keeping it going. The deals, the people, all of the family orientation. It was all what made it work, and it made it work well. If they ever reopen something like that again, they probably have a very, very good chance of being very successful, because it was.
Going back on the other one, is any kind of particular customer stories that you have?
Customer story. There were many.
Or even employee stories, but yeah.
Actually, it was kind of funny. The last couple of days that it was open, we had a crazy amount of draw of people. It was one of the busiest days I've ever seen it, and I've seen it busy. There were days when we had upwards of 3,000 people in 6 hours. Anybody who knows who's gone through something like that knows you don't want to do it on a regular basis. It is extremely busy. But actually, there was one time when we had that many people, and it was just 3 of us. 4, including the manager, but there were 3 of us running the place. With that many people, it was astoundingly crazy. It was, but it also made it possible for the whole place to run efficiently well, just with a few amount of people. I mean, the people were always good. Stories, I honestly, there's 1,000 that I could think of.
Right.
Many of the most memorable ones were definitely probably not kid friendly.
Okay, understood.
God, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Ones that were okay. So. Some of the more funnier ones were the girl that got bit in the theater. That was.
By another human or like an animal?
Oh no, that was another human.
Okay.
Yeah, another person bit her. Yeah.
The guy that dissed you, and then the cop made sure he hit the wall on his way out.
Oh yes, yeah. I forgot about that one. There was that guy who. Yeah, because the cop was like, yeah, he hit him on every wall. The guy hit on the way out of the building because he couldn't get out because he was drunk. He was too drunk to actually stand or to have a coherent conversation with the officer because he was completely trashed and he was passed out in the theater. And the cop came in with the bottle and was like, "Is this yours?" He was like, kind of, I guess. Why? Is there still something in it? Well, there was. Made the guy throw out the bottle. He was very upset. Cop went up to go get his belongings so he could leave. The guy got upset like instantly overnight. It was bad. And the officer didn't want to take any chances, so he kindly asked the gentleman to get up. He refused to do so properly. So the officer made sure that his head met every wall on the way out of the theater before he decided to leave. Because he had to be unruly. I mean, we didn't have to call the police often, thank God.
That was a once in a blue moon thing?
Yeah. It wasn't often. It was frequent enough that the police responded because they knew that if we were calling, there was a situation that was over and above what we could handle because we handled a lot. I was more or less kind of the bouncer.
Yeah, tell us about that. Yeah, you used to be like the master of kicking people out. Please, actually talk about stuff like that.
Actually, there was a few times when that was actually very hilarious. There was a time whenever I had entered a theater, one of the girls I came up to talk to because she had been, her friends had been unruly, and they wanted to cause more disruption in the movie. I came down to them and I asked them, if there was an issue, if there was a problem. They told me that there wasn't, but that they had recognized me, and I said, "Oh, how?" And they specified that I was the one who had kicked out their friend previous because they'd been unruly. Again, and causing disruptions in the movie. And I thought that was pretty funny that they recognized me based off of their friend getting kicked out of the theater just as they initially were being prepared to do so. Oh yeah, I was more or less the master at kicking people out because it was people pretty much told on themselves constantly. Wrongdoing is more or less the guilty will generally say it. More or less, you don't even have to guess. They'll let you know if they're guilty or not. It's kind of funny that way.
Now, there was one point that you were a staff leader, so you were definitely a boss there. How did you feel? I should say this. I know for the 9 years you've been there, how long were you a staff leader, and how did you like that kind of almost boss type?
I was a staff leader for maybe 3 or 4 years. It wasn't terribly long, but it was more or less well-deserved because the only reason I really got to be staff leader was because I was capable of switching from one job to the other without having too many issues, being able to perform the duties that I needed to. It was kind of nice because it was definitely interesting because I found that if you treat the staff the way you would like to be treated and or if you work beside them rather than yelling at them, they were awesome. One of the best staffs I've ever seen in action. It just kept getting better, honestly. It just got better until we were one of the top staff in the entire company. Not just our theater, we were good in our theater, no, the entire company. understood and knew how well we did our jobs. Many of them moved on and upwards in the company themselves. I know a couple that the company came and promoted because we could handle the jobs that we were given.